Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Chris, your NFL writer here at OccupyFantasy.com, here with another look at the Week 12 slates on FanDuel, DraftKings, and Yahoo. This is the wide receiver position. Going over all the wide receivers you need to be aware of here for the Week 12 action, and you certainly don't want to be without some of these guys in your lineups this week. But first, as always, please make sure you're subscribed to the channel, like the video, leave a comment below if you have any questions about wide receivers. Be happy to engage with you in all those different ways. Here in Week 12, obviously Cooper Kupp, the most expensive player on the slate, 9,600 here on DraftKings, 9,500 over on FanDuel. Off a bye, still elite. 27% of the targets for the Rams, 31% of the air yards of the last 3 weeks of play. Just one touchdown in those games, so he's cooled off in that department, but the volume hasn't. Cooper Kupp has 23 red zone targets this year. That's the most out of any player in the NFL. So the touchdown production has been high because the opportunity for Cooper Kupp to score touchdowns has been high. We think that will continue here in a big, important game for them against the Packers in Week 12. Speaking of the Packers, obviously Devonte Adams. 8,600 here on DraftKings, 8,700 over on FanDuel. 31% of the targets, 38% of the air yards from Aaron Rodgers over the last 3 weeks, and there's no reason to expect that that'll change anytime soon. This will be a big game for the Packers as well, and you got to believe Rodgers will continue to look towards his best friend in this offense as often as he can. Keenan Allen with the Los Angeles Chargers with a ridiculous 37 targets over the last 3 weeks. That's more than double any other receiver pass catcher available on the Chargers. 32% of the targets is what that shakes out to be. 44% of the air yards from Justin Herbert. So we have the best weapon in the offense, the most reliable weapon in the offense, therefore the highest floor, highest ceiling weapon at receiver in the offense for the Chargers. In a week where his quarterback's going to be one of the most popular quarterbacks people will be picking, Keenan Allen should be considered pretty highly as well for that reason. He's got no touchdowns over the last 3 weeks despite all this volume, and that's another thing that we expect to turn around pretty quickly. Should have had at least one score in there based off of his opportunity. With the Bucks carrying the highest implied team total on the slate and it being the highest total game on the slate, obviously Chris Godwin going to be someone that we're going to look to pretty heavily. Still the main receiver for this offense in terms of moving the ball. Between the 20s. Chris Godwin definitely runs a lot of those routes in the middle of the field, and Tom Brady looks his way fairly frequently. Not as much high ceiling on a per-target basis as Mike Evans, because he's got a little bit of a lower ADOT route tree, but still have to like Chris Godwin as a really strong option for lower contests, especially in a week where we expect the Bucs to be one of the best offenses in football. 20% of the targets, 15% of the errors of the last 3 weeks for Chris Godwin. But still, as I mentioned, a very strong option no matter what in this offense. Jalen Waddle with the Miami Dolphins was one of our underperforming wide receivers last week. No longer underperforming, but still performing very nicely in general. 21% of the targets, 28% of the air yards the last few weeks. No touchdowns. A game that is a little lower in total, 42 points. But Waddle, one of the Miami options that we think will be popular this week to pair in some game stacks with the popular Cam Newton and Christian McCaffrey this week. Leviskus Chanult with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Don't think we've talked about him much this year, but they're running out of options. They're running out of opportunities to not give Leviskus Chanult the football, and Urban Meyer seems to be aware of it. They're basically saying that they need to find ways to get the ball into his hands now that they are without Jamal Agnew on top of DJ Chark. Getting pretty thin at wide receiver, so Chanult finally, even though it probably should have been this way earlier, seems to be on deck to get more involved here against the Atlanta Falcons in Week 12. Just $4,400 here on DraftKings, $5,600 over on FanDuel. Chanult is not the only Jaguar that we're looking at. In addition to the wide receivers that we like the most for all contest types, we also have our underperforming wide receivers that we really like for tournaments this week. And our top underperforming wide receiver is someone that I liked a lot last week that I led off our wide receiver video with, and it's Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver Ja'Marr Chase. Ja'Marr Chase has 23% of the targets from Joe Burrow over the last 3 weeks of play for the Bengals, 39% of the air yards. He is not underperforming in the touchdown department, but he's underperforming in the opportunity department. He's catching under 50% of his targets from Joe Burrow. We expect that to turn around. Big divisional game here against the Steelers in Week 12. We like Ja'Marr Chase to continue to be the top weapon for Joe Burrow, so he's obviously our top option in tournaments based off of his appearance on this list. You see A.J. Brown on here. He was ruled out. He will not be playing against the Patriots, so you can disregard that. But when we get A.J. Brown back, whenever that is, he'll be back on this list and someone to consider. He, in his last 3 games, 21% of the targets, 32% of the air yards from Ryan Tannehill, hasn't scored any touchdowns. So the second that he rejoins the lineup, we're going to be interested in him in our lineups. Again, we're just talking about Chanult. Marvin Jones Jr. is the other guy. Leads the Jaguars in targets over the last 3 weeks, and that included the work that Jamal Agnew was seeing. Agnew now out for the year. 19% of the targets from Trevor Lawrence, 35% of the air yards. No touchdowns for MJJ. We expect MJJ to be a good tournament option here against the Falcons in Week 12. Speaking of that, an opportunity for an off-the-wall game stack here because we like Kyle Pitts at tight end as an underperforming wide receiver as well. 19% of the targets from Matt Ryan, 29% of the air yards in the Falcons' last 3 games. No touchdowns for Pitts. The only complicating factor here for Pitts is we do expect Cordero Patterson to probably rejoin the offense for the Falcons, but that actually may help. That may actually open things up for Pitts if it brings just another weapon that the Jaguars defense has to prepare for in the passing game. So we like Pitts a lot. Van Jefferson with the Rams. He was on our list before the bye for the Rams. 15% of the targets last 3 Rams games, 30% of the air yards from Matthew Stafford. He has no touchdowns as well, at least one expected. So that's why he's on this list primarily. Another couple of weeks to incorporate Odell Beckham into the offense is the only complicating factor here for Van Jefferson. But complicating factor may actually keep his roster percentage in check, and that's something that we like to see in tournaments. We like guys that are on our underperforming wide receiver list that come with relatively low roster percentage because it gives us a little bit of an edge if things go the way that we expect them to. So those are the underperformers. It's a pretty short list for a short slate, just 10 games this week. There are some other options that obviously we're interested in looking at. Elijah Moore with the Jets has seen his opportunity and his playing time increase. For weeks, we were saying that they were using 4 and 5 different receivers. That actually concentrated down to basically Moore and Crowder last week out for the Jets. So now facing a Texans defense that in their own right is not very good, Elijah Moore may actually be a pretty interesting tournament option. Just 5,600 on DraftKings, 6,400 over on FanDuel. Double-digit target upside is what I think he has. So I think that's interesting. We do like the 49ers and the Vikings game. So obviously Justin Jefferson, our favorite Viking receiver, Deebo Samuel with the 49ers, not just mixing in at receiver, but also mixing in at running back. So that's certainly going to be interesting. Devonta Smith as the top wide receiver for Jalen Hurts, who I do think has the highest upside at quarterback this week, is also an interesting wide receiver to consider. An identical $6,400 on both DraftKings and FanDuel for Week 12 contests. That's going to do it, folks. Keep an eye out for the daily plug at OccupyFantasy.com. That's where we will go over not just our favorite expensive and value plays at wide receiver for you, but also our favorite quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, all the players that you need to be aware of to have success in Week 12. And not just that, we will give you our favorite ways to deploy them in low-risk or high-risk contests. So depending on the type of contest that you're playing, you might want to use these players slightly differently in your lineups. So that's the most important part of the plug to read. You're certainly not going to want to miss that. As always, please make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment below if you have any questions. Be happy to see you do all those things. Once again, for Occupy, I am Chris. Thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.